Chapter 15. Chapter 15 you can see is about working capital management. So we'll talk about what working capital is. That's going back a few chapters. Beginning of the class we talked about what working management was, or working capital was. Now we're going to talk about what are some things we can do to better manage it, make sure we've got a good handle on the numbers, and understand how decisions we make affect our working capital. So working capital is simply our current assets. So just if you didn't remember that, that's what it is. Net working capital is your current assets minus your current liabilities. And net operating working capital is your current asset minus current liabilities, taking out notes payable. Okay, so that's three different definitions right there that you have to understand to really be able to kind of get this chapter. So the better you understand those three terms, the better you'll be at identifying the numbers you need to plug into calculations when you do the work in Aplia. And just of course I'll ask questions about those types of things on a quiz or a test about the chapter also. So working capital, net operating working capital, and net working capital are the three terms you need to know. Current asset investment policy, and this is really kind of the key of the chapter, is deciding how much of each type of current asset you want to hold. So think of your common current assets, things like cash, account receivable, inventory. Those are the big three. How much of each level do we want to hold? Because holding too much can be good and bad of each one. Also, we have to figure out how to finance our current assets as we acquire inventory, as receivables build up, as cash builds up. How do we acquire and pay for inventory or other current assets? Working capital management refers to making sure we've got a good handle on our cash balance, what that is, projecting our cash balance, inventory balances, account receivable balances, and then short-term liability management, which includes primarily accounts payable would be your big one. So what they're going to do in this chapter is give us information about Ski Company, Ski Inc., and they're going to show us a whole bunch of ratios here, and this goes back a few chapters when we did financial statement analysis towards the beginning of the class, and we looked at a whole bunch of ratios. And you can see here that we've got the current ratio, a debt to asset ratio, we've got turnover of cash and securities, day sales outstanding, inventory, fixed asset turnover, total asset turnover, and the profit margin. And all of these then relate back to the industry average. So some are better, some are worse than industry, which is pretty common. And so they're going to ask us some questions about this, and I'm realizing that my PowerPoint's numbers are a little bit goofy here. You can't see all the numbers, but return on equity down here is one also you can see. It's kind of hiding out at the bottom there. I'm going to ask us some questions about this. How does Ski's current assets investment policy compare with the industry? And they're going to talk right here about current asset investment policies reflected in the current ratio, turnover of cash securities, inventory turnover, and days sales outstanding. So we can look at these ones right here. The first four is what they're really referring to. The current ratio is lower than the industry. Debt to assets is higher than the industry. And turnover of cash and securities is lower. And days sales outstanding is higher. So those are some of the key ones to take a look at. Inventory turnover is lower also. These ratios indicate that Ski has large amounts of working capital relative to its level of sales. They're either very conservative or inefficient, and we don't really know without maybe asking some questions. It's possible that they have deliberately chosen to hold high levels of certain current assets for a reason. We don't know that just by doing an analysis. You can always ask the question if you can, but we'll just kind of look at it from that perspective of they're either being really conservative in their approach or just simply inefficient in their approach. So a conservative or relaxed policy may be appropriate if it leads to greater profitability. However, Ski is not as profitable as the average firm in the industry, and so that suggests that maybe they are holding excess current assets. So You can kind of just go back and take a look at some of the ratios. And the profit margin down here, which is kind of goofed up in terms of it's not lining up right, but SKU's profit margin is 2.07, lower than the industry at 3.5, so that is a potential indicator then that maybe they're just simply inefficient, and that they could be better at managing the amount of current assets that they have on hand. So that kind of leads to three potential different approaches that a company can choose when it comes to working capital. A moderate policy, match the current assets with the maturity of the financing, which means if we're going to borrow money to buy inventory, inventory is a current asset, therefore we would just use current liabilities to finance that. We'd use short-term debt to finance short-term assets. Aggressive means that you would use short-term financing to finance permanent assets, assets that will last longer than a short term. And conservative means use permanent capital for permanent assets and temporary assets. So three different looks, three different perspectives on how we can do that. And I should just mention that they do a good job on page 531 of giving you a little bit more detail about that and kind of what the ramifications are. And also on page 533, you will see this information right here. And this kind of just gives you a look about what the different policies look like in terms of financing assets. So this is the moderate policy. 533 shows you all three, moderate, aggressive, and conservative. Moderate's right here. And so with moderate, it says here that look at the sources of financing are on the right. Long-term financing is stock, bonds, and spontaneous current liabilities. Short-term financing is short-term loans. And so it says here with a moderate, we're using, long-term financing to buy fixed assets and what we call our permanent current assets. All companies have a certain level of current assets that they will always have on the books in terms of a minimum amount of inventory, a minimum amount of receivables primarily, that just are always there. There's obviously fluctuation, and that fluctuation is what they call the temporary current assets. So at some level, as we have seasonality in a business, current assets, inventory balances will go up and down, receivable balances will go up and down, and that fluctuating portion of the current assets, those are what we're going to finance most of that with short-term loans. But you can see here we're also financing a little bit of our permanent current assets with short-term loans, but most of our permanent current assets we're just kind of treating as if they were fixed assets and using long-term financing to purchase and acquire those. And then we go with the conservative approach here, and it says that we're using long-term financing really for pretty much everything, and really just almost no or zero short-term debt. And so we're using long-term debt to finance everything, and we're maybe just working on some marketable securities. We're just putting money into marketable securities as we have fluctuations in cash. If cash builds up, we're just putting that into marketable securities to get a little bit of a return. But so conservative versus moderate. Most companies are probably somewhere between those two. You can definitely go with an aggressive approach, which they didn't show us in a slide, but the aggressive approach is just on the middle of page 533. Where aggressive, we're going to use a higher level of short-term loans. That's really what the difference is. If we go with aggressive, we're going to use more short-term loans and less long-term loans, and we'll use more short-term loans then to finance more of those permanent current assets. Okay, next is the cash conversion cycle, called the CCC, and that's a really important one to know. It's on page 535. The cash conversion cycle focuses on the length of time between when a company makes payments to its creditors and when the company receives payment from customers. So how long does it take us to convert to cash? So the formula here is pretty easy. It's our inventory conversion period plus the average collection period minus our payables deferrable period. So how long does it take us to turn cash, to turn sales into cash? So here again is the formula. Inventory conversion plus average collection minus payables deferred period. So the inventory conversion period is your days per year divided by inventory turnover. And so we go with 365 divided by my inventory turnover ratio that they gave us a few screens ago, plus the collection period of 46 minus my deferral period. So my cash conversion cycle for this company is 92 days. And you want that shorter is better, right? If it's 92 days, I have to wait that long to receive all my cash. So the next part then is, and of course they explain that it's a little bit more in 535 for you, and make sure you take a look at that. And then show you the formula on the middle of 536. Next is minimizing cash holdings, and the issue here of course is that when you hold cash, cash doesn't really do a lot for you. You need to have cash, clearly. Everybody knows that. You need to have cash in the bank so you're liquid enough to be able to pay your current bills and not have to worry about your cash balance. However, if you have too much cash, your money's really not working for you. When you have your cash in checking or savings, you get a very small return on your money. You're getting maybe 0.1 interest, 0.1% interest rate. It's very small. Even a business that has more cash may only be getting 0.5%, or maybe if you're at the right kind of bank and you have a lot of cash, you might be getting 1%. No matter what, though, that's not much of a return. And so the danger here, or the issue, is that if you hold too much cash, that cash is just sitting there not earning a return for you. And so it says here, what are some ways to minimize our cash holdings and get our money working more quickly for us, is really kind of what they mean by this. Using a lockbox is a really good one. If you've never heard of what a lockbox is, it's when a business works closely with a bank, and when customers mail in payments, so this works for businesses primarily that are receiving a lot of their payments through the mail, with checks. And as those payments go to the business, they go really to a P.O. box. So anytime you put a check in the mail for a bill, look at the remittance advice and look what the address is. If it's a P.O. box, there's a good chance this company is using a lockbox. And so what happens then is the bank actually empties that lockbox every day. And the bank just takes all the checks that are in that lockbox, puts them right in the company's account. And so that cash never has to go through the company. It just goes directly to the bank. The bank then sends the remittance advices to the company to do the proper accounting and make sure customer accounts are updated for payments and so on. Also, a company can insist on wire transfers or debit and credit cards from customers. When I was in property management, I was the CFO of a property management company for a while, and when we signed a new tenant, we gave them a discount. It wasn't huge, it was maybe like $50 off the first month if they would sign up for some kind of automatic payment system in terms of an EFT transfer directly from their bank account to ours, or a debit card, credit card on file that we could just use to make the rent payment every month. Because we knew collectability would go up. We knew, once we do that, we're going to get paid right away in the first of the month. It just saved us a lot of hassle and headaches. So companies are getting better about that, about setting up automatic payments and transfers from customer accounts directly to the business account. Trying to synchronize your inflows and outflows of cash, that's a tougher one to do. But just trying to time when your bills go out and have to be paid with the inflows of cash. So making sure that as cash comes in, that's matching up with the cash that needs to go out to pay for the company bills. I've tried that. It's hard to do. It's in construction and property management, that was a little bit tougher one for us to do, but you can sure try that. And then reduce the need for safety stock of cash. And so safety stock is just, again, having that pile of cash just in case And the next part of the chapter is going to be cash budgeting and forecasting of cash needs. So if we can get really good at understanding our cash projections and how our cash position may change over time, if we can get good at that, then that will help us be good at predicting our cash needs, understanding what our cash balances may be, and so on. So that's part of what we need to kind of work on too. So increasing our forecast accuracy of cash, holding marketable securities, and negotiating a line of credit. So again, when I was in property management, almost every property we managed had a line of credit. And what that would mean then is if that property had a slow month for cash coming in or had some major expense, sometimes what would happen is you'd have a bunch of people would move out in 1 month that had lived there for a while, and all of a sudden now you've got a whole bunch of carpeting to replace or some appliances to replace or painting, and kind of a cash drain. So just having a line of credit on hand just to be able to pay for those things until you get those units rented, and then you got cash coming back in, just something like that. Or holding marketable securities just means, as we have extra cash, putting that into a money market mutual fund, or some kind of a mutual fund or some kind of investment that's fairly liquid but still gets you at least a decent return so that your money's working for you at least a little bit. So that's what all that means about minimizing cash holdings. They do a good job of explaining that also in the book. Next is your cash budget, and that's kind of, to me, the meat and potatoes of this chapter is working on what a cash budget is, trying to figure out what that is. So a cash budget is really when a business sits down and is trying to forecast cash coming in and the timing of it, and cash going out and the timing of that, and just making sure will we have cash on hand to meet our bills as they come due, and if we don't, where will that cash come from? So you're forecasting cash in, cash out, and a projected ending balance of cash. You can do this then to plan for loans needed. Again, maybe you have that line of credit open so that it's available. When we had lines of credit, it was just a matter of me calling the bank and saying, we want to tap into that loan. Here's the amount we want to use. They just simply put it in your checking account and then send you a few days later a statement saying here's what you borrowed and here's the next payment date. You can do a cash budget on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. You can update it as often as the business wants to. Some businesses, that's something that's very, very critical, just understanding your cash position on a day-to-day basis. Some, weekly or monthly, might be all that you have to do. And of course, you should also forecast that just so that you can anticipate your cash position. Again, if you need to borrow cash, you can arrange for that, or if you think you're going to have extra cash, you can then plan how we want to invest that cash. What should we do with that? Pay off some loans, invest that, whatever we think is best. Okay, so they're going to help us put together a small cash budget here with some of the data in the PowerPoint here for Ski Company again. And they're showing us then for a couple of months cash collection. So this is all on a cash basis. This is cash coming in. So it's different than revenues. Remember, in accounting, you can earn a revenue without actually collecting the cash right away. We're focused now on cash. So we're focused on when does the cash actually come in the door of our business. And same thing with the cash outflows. We're focusing on when do the payments go out. So as we purchase inventory, as we pay our wages, as we pay our rent, that's what we're focusing on, literally the cash in and the cash out. And then you can see here, for these 2 months, we're projecting more cash coming in than cash coming out. And again, I don't know what happened in my PowerPoint that I got goofed up here, but you can see that cash at start, if no borrowing, is $3,000. And then we've got our net cash inflows, and that's from the previous screen, the 13.8 and the 18.3. You can see those numbers. Our cumulative cash less our target amount of cash we want on hand less a surplus. And for a business checking account, it's not unusual that the bank requires you to hold a minimum number in order to not have to pay any fees or anything like that. So it's not unusual for a bank to say you have to hold 1,500 or whatever the number is, and if you don't, then we'll start to charge you some fees and stuff. So that minimum usually is based on what the bank wants. So their cash budget was good, very favorable. They're projecting more cash coming in than going out, and so after 2 months, they're going to have a really nice sized cash balance of 33,000. And I should mention too then that the company should have a plan for that, right? If they believe that's way more cash than they need to meet current bills as they come due, there should be a plan to what do we do with that. Can we pay off some loans early? Would that be okay? Or can we just find a good investment to put that into, at least let it earn some interest and dividend income, so at least our money's working for us? Because again, if it's just sitting in the checking account, it's earning just a tiny rate of return that really doesn't really do us a whole lot of good. So once we've got a cash budget, once we kind of have a good feel on the ratios and the numbers that go into our cash budget, what's really nice about it is that we can begin to think about how can we improve the budget. So this budget we looked at was really good, but let's just say maybe it wasn't so good. And we can just kind of think about, okay, what kind of policies could we implement to make the numbers better, to improve our cash coming in or minimize the cash going out, whatever it is. So it says here, how could bad debts be worked into the cash budget? Collections would be reduced by the amount of bad debt losses. So what we're saying here is it realistic to assume that every sale on account turns into 100% of cash received? And for most companies, that's not realistic. Once you make the decision to sell on credit, odds are somebody's not going to pay you back because the company will go bankrupt, or a creditor will just disappear, or somebody who owes you money will just disappear. So we should really be more realistic with that number. And what they're saying here is, if our experience is that anytime we have a credit sale, that we receive 97 cents on the dollar, 97% of those credit sales come back as cash, we need to factor that into our cash budget. So clearly then the lower collections number would potentially lead to higher borrowing requirements for our company. So just looking at some of Ski's numbers here. Now we just looked at, I'm just realizing it, we looked at January and February here, but they mention October and November here. But cash holdings will exceed the target balance for each month. The cash budget indicates the company is holding too much cash, which I kind of mentioned earlier. And Ski could improve its EVA, its economic value added, and we covered that concept a few chapters ago, by either investing that cash in more productive assets, again, maybe investing that into something, or maybe even just paying out dividends. And one that they don't mention here that is an option is if they have debt, potentially just paying off that debt also. So again, the question becomes, is there a reason to hold cash? And for some companies, there definitely is a reason to hold cash. You want to do that. Not always, though. We don't know that. Sometimes you don't know that until you ask somebody at the company or do some deeper analysis and understand, why exactly are we holding this amount of cash. And you can see here for Ski, if sales turn out to be considerably less than expected, they could have a cash shortfall. So maybe they're uncertain about their sales projections. They just want to hold a reserve of cash just in case. So we're just being conservative. We don't have a lot of faith in our sales forecast. We're hoping for the best, but we're being realistic and going, if it doesn't turn out the way we think, we should have some cash on hand just as that rainy day fund. Or finally, we're building up to buy something. Maybe we need to buy some property, plant, and equipment type assets, and we want that money sitting there so that we can fund that future purchase. And we don't know for sure what's going on with this company. But those are all possibilities to think about why you would hold cash. Next is inventory. And inventory typically is one of our very largest current asset amounts. And so inventory has a cost to it, not just buying it, but having it on hand. There's a carrying cost to having inventory on hand. Storage and handling cost. It has to be stored somewhere. People have to be moving it around. It needs to be insured. Potentially property tax or depreciation or obsolescence, depending on what kind of inventory it is. Clearly, it could go old while sitting on the shelf or while sitting in a warehouse. It become obsolete, spoil, whatever it is, depending on what type of inventory it is that we're carrying. There's ordering costs. We need to have a purchasing department, somebody who is, ordering inventory. We're paying for shipping. We're paying for handling. Every time we place an order, we have to pay for shipping, handling, purchasing, all those things. There's also a cost of running short. And that's the tough part about inventory for retailers is how much do we carry? And do we know if we're carrying what customers really want to buy from us also? So if we run short of inventory, clearly if customers show up and they're frustrated because what they want to buy isn't there, sale items or just everyday items, they get frustrated. They'll maybe stop coming back to our store. So we have to be careful about that. If we're a manufacturer and we need a constant supply of raw materials to manufacture our product, and if we run short of some raw material, that disrupts our production schedules, and that gets real dicey also. So reducing inventory levels generally reduces carrying cost, increases ordering cost, and may increase the cost of running short. So that's the balance. The delicate balance is if you try to lower inventory, the inventory levels, yes, your carrying costs go down, but your ordering cost and your cost of running short may go up. So the question with Ski Company, going back to the data they gave us at the beginning of the slides, are they holding too much inventory? Their turnover is lower than industry. It's 4.82 versus 7, which indicates that their inventory does not turn over nearly as fast as the industry. So that is a good indicator that they are holding too much inventory per dollar of sale. So the answer is most likely yes, they are holding too much inventory. By holding excess inventory, the firm is increasing its costs, which reduces return on equity because there's just, again, all those costs that come into play that we just got done mentioning about holding too much inventory. I have too many carrying costs now, potentially some more ordering costs. I'm not running short most likely, but my carrying costs definitely are higher than they would need to be because I hold too much inventory. And so also in terms of too much inventory, the question can be, do I have a lot of inventory on hand that customers just simply don't want? Do I need to be better at understanding my customer needs? Is it going old while just sitting on my shelves or in my warehouse? So it's things I need to think about and worry about when it comes to having that low of a turnover compared to my industry. Also the last point, moreover, additional working capital must be financed, so economic value added is also lowered. So again, the more inventory we have on hand, how did I acquire that? Did I have to borrow to acquire that? Typically there's an account payable number. Typically I have 30 days to pay for my inventory when I buy it. But regardless, those excess holding costs and financing costs of buying inventory lower ROE and lowers my EVA numbers. So the question should always be then, what changes can we make? So the nice thing about doing this type of analysis of looking at ratios and looking at your cash position, looking at your inventory holdings, just anything that involves working capital, is once I understand where I'm at, and if I'm realizing like Ski that I could be doing a lot better than I am in terms of my working capital management, what I should really do then is focus on how can I make this better. So in the short run, cash will increase as inventory purchases decline. So if we're going to reduce inventory And the key is, without negatively or adversely affecting sales, how will that impact my cash position? Okay. So in the short run, cash will increase as inventory purchases decline. We're going to stop buying inventory and try to get rid of the extra inventory we have now. So we're going to slow down the purchase of inventory. This will reduce financing or target cash balance. In the long run, a company is likely to take steps to reduce its cash holdings and increase its economic value added. Because that excess cash then, as that cash increases, that cash should be used then to make investments in more productive assets, maybe property, plant, and equipment, or investing it, returning it to our owners as dividends, or paying off long-term debt. Okay, so which is all kind of the items that are mentioned in the last two right here. Okay, so so the better you are at inventory management, the more profitable you will be, the higher your ROA will be, the higher your EVA will be. Do Ski's customers pay more or less promptly than those of its competitors? And it's not a good number. Okay, it's not a good number. So the industry is customers pay within 32 days. For Ski, our customers pay within 45 days, 45.6 days to be exact. So not very good. Okay, so it takes 45 days to get paid back as opposed to 32 days for the industry. Let's just assume that when we make a credit sale to a customer, if the credit terms are 30 days, that's a big problem. Customers are taking 15.6 extra days to pay us back. Not so good. So Ski's customers are paying less promptly. Ski should consider tightening its credit policy to reduce the days sales outstanding number. Now, the hard part with doing that is, will it negatively impact sales? So if we get tighter on our credit, does that mean there are certain customers that we should stop selling to because they're not as credit worthy as others? And do we need to get a little bit tougher on our customers, so that when they are late, we remind them, hopefully gently, that you owe us some money. So that's the hard balancing part about this. So the question then becomes, in the credit policy, what items about our credit policy do we change? The credit period, how long do we let our customers pay us back? Do we go with a 30-day period, a 45-day period? Maybe right now we're going with the 45-day period. Maybe right now what we're doing is we're selling on credit to our customers saying you have 45 days to pay us back. We don't know what the credit terms are, but whatever it is, it's longer than the industry average. And so the shorter the period means the quicker I receive cash, and the quicker I receive cash, the better off I am. Everybody knows that. Okay, and so a shorter collection period or a shorter credit period reduces the DSO number, and it reduces average AR, but it may discourage sales because possibly that's why we have those customers. And those customers are going, well, if you guys are going to switch from 45 days to 30 days, I'll go somewhere else because I can find somebody else who's going to sell to me and let me pay them back in 45 days, and they have the same stuff you guys have. So that's the hard part about that. Will we lose sales if we shrink the days that people have to pay us back? Cash discounts. Clearly, if we offer a cash discount, 2% within 10 days or 3% within 15 days, whatever it is we choose, that lowers the price. That lowers the actual amount of cash we're going to receive. However, it will attract new customers, possibly if we offer a discount, because they'll be going, well, I want to save that 2 or 3% that you're offering. I'll sign up for that. But it does also reduce the DSO, which is the whole point. We want to try to reduce that DSO. Our credit standards, again, how restrictive are we? Are we tougher at screening customers that we sell on credit to? What's our credit policy in terms of what are the minimum qualifications that a business must have to earn credit from us? Those are all types of questions. Because bad debt expense reduces the amount of cash we receive. Fewer bad debts reduces DSO. And of course, the collection policy, how tough do we get? We have to be careful about not upsetting our customers, damaging customer relationships as we manage that. So it's kind of that fine line, and sometimes you have to retrain your customers, and sometimes customers just figure out what they can get away with, and they take advantage of you if you let them. So just lots of things there to have to kind of think through regarding how you approach your customers. Does Ski face any risk if it restricts credit policy? The answer, of course, is yes. A restrictive credit policy may discourage sales. If we get too restrictive, we may not deem credit worthy some of our customers. That's very possible. We may discover that we alienate customers as we get tougher. There's issues there that we have to be thinking about. So some customers may choose to go elsewhere if they're pressured to pay bills sooner, and you have to you have to balance that benefit of fewer bad debts with the cost of possible lost sales. So let's just say that Ski is able to reduce DSO without negatively impacting sales. Let's just say they are able to do that. What would be the effect on the cash position of the company? Be two main things. In the short run, customers would pay sooner. This would increase cash holdings and reduce financing or target cash balance needed. So the good news is we'd receive more cash sooner, and financing costs would go down. In the long run, the company would hopefully invest cash in more productive assets. Again, putting that money aside, putting it into invested assets that return interest or dividends, or invest that in the company by buying more efficient property, plant, and equipment, or pay dividends to shareholders. Whatever it is, in the long run, those actions will all increase your economic value added. Okay, let's talk about what trade credit is. Trade credit is furnished by a firm's suppliers. Trade credit is quite often, for almost all companies, the largest source of short-term credit, especially for small companies. It's spontaneous, it's easy to get, but the cost can be high. So it says here, if a firm buys $3 million net, which is $3,030,303 gross on terms of 110 net 30, the firm can forego discounts and pay on day 40 without penalty. And so it just says here, my net daily purchases then is 3 million divided by 365, which is 8,219. But we have to look at this a little bit closer. Okay, so there's my daily purchase number. But I also have to look at what the cost is of trade credit. So payables level if the firm takes discounts. So the question here is, if we pay within 10 days, we can save 1%. But we can actually pay up by day 40 without a penalty. So even though the terms are 110 net 30, what they're saying, and 110 net 30 means if I pay within the 10 days, I can take 1% off the bill, or the net amount's due within 30 days. But they're saying here that you can actually pay on day 40 without a penalty. So maybe after day 41 forward, the company would that we owe the money to would charge us a penalty for late payment. So at payables level, if the firm takes discounts, payables would be 82,192. And the 82,192 again is our net daily purchase times 10. So if we always paid our bill within 10 days, we'd have an account payable number on average of $82,000. If we forego the discounts and we just simply pay on the 40th day, because that's the last day we can pay without a penalty, our payable level would be $328,767. So what that means is then our total trade credit could be $328,767. Our free credit is $82,192, and our costly trade credit then is $246,575. So basically then what's that cost of that credit? So the firm loses 1% or $30,303 of discounts to obtain the $246,575 in extra trade credit. Because remember, if we hold on to our cash and we don't pay the bill until day 40, there's a cost to that because we could have saved 1% by paying the bill within 10 days. So what's the cost of that? And so it says here that 3303, that extra that we're not taking advantage of, divided by the 246,575 is 12.29%. So the 30,303 is paid throughout the year, so the effective cost of costly trade credit is higher. So there's a 12% cost of basically having that extra credit, having extra 246,575, which is a high number. And so the nominal cost of trade credit formula, and you'll be doing a few of these in APLEA, is you take the discount divided by 100 minus the discount. So this was a 1% discount, so it's 1 divided by 100 minus 1 times 365 divided by days credit outstanding minus the discount period, which was 40 and 10. And we get 12.29%. The periodic rate then is 0.01 divided by 0.99. We get periods per year. How many of these periods are there in a year? 365 divided by 40 minus 10 is 12. Multiply that all out, and the effective cost of trade credit is 13%. So the effective rate is based on how many compounding periods are there in the year. So the nominal is 12.29, but the effective, which is the real cost, is 13.01%. So what this tells you is you're paying that much in interest to hold onto your cash for an extra 30 days. That's a high number. So you're better off just taking advantage of the discount and paying within the 10 days. And it will always work out that way in finance. You always take advantage of the discounts, and basically what this tells me is even if I didn't have the cash to take advantage of the discounts, if I can borrow money at a rate less than 13%, I'm still going to come out ahead by paying within 10 days. So even if I have to borrow money, as long as the interest rate's under 13%, I can still come out ahead. Okay, bank loans, another source of financing for a company. You can borrow $100,000 for 1 year at an 8% nominal rate. Interest may be set up under one of the following scenarios: simple annual interest or installment loan with an add-on of 12 months. The annual interest is very easy to compute. Simple annual interest means no discount or add-on. 8% times 100,000 is 8,000, so the effective rate, the nominal rate and the effective rate are the same because this was a 1-year compounding. So nominal rate and the effective rate are both 8%. For a 1-year simple loan, interest loan, the nominal rate and the effective annual rate are the same because it was a 1-year compounding. Add-on interest, a little bit different calculation. 8% of 100,000 is 8,000. The face amount of 100 plus the 8,000. Then we take that into the 108,000 divided by 12 to get a $9,000 monthly payment. The average loan outstanding would be 50,000, and the approximate cost would be 16%. To find the exact effective rate, recognize that the firm receives 100,000 and must make monthly payments of 9,000 like an annuity, and then they could just show us. Now you can use the Excel files I gave everybody way back when we did the present value calculations. That was chapter 5. You can use that. Excel has the effective rate formula in it. It's called the effect rate, or the effect formula in Excel, and you can use that to compute what the effective rate is also. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I like this chapter because I think you can really relate this chapter to a business very simply in terms of managing your working capital, doing those cash budgets, deciding if you should take advantage of discounts on accounts payable. All those things I think really come into play quite well. So I'm going to do a little bit another recording, just show you the Excel file for the chapter that the publisher gave us. And as always, if you have questions about the material, just let me know.